Hi and welcome to the Outquisitions podcast, where we spotlight industry leaders redefining success. The goal of each episode of the podcast is to uncover their stories, their strategies, and insights to inspire, inform, and really elevate your own journey. So let's dive into today's conversation with yet another super inspiring guest. If you want to listen to a really interesting talk, then stay tuned. Yeah, Oliver, great to see you on board on the podcast. To kick things off, could you share a bit about yourself and what motivated you to start your company?
Hi, my name is J.P. Osborne. Pleasure to be here. I run Ocool Consulting, and in a discipline that is heavily over-indexed on communications at the expense of the other parts of marketing. We help businesses with the other bits, primarily diagnosis and strategy. Now, I didn't start there, and what motivated me to start my business was more of the identification of an opportunity where I was to start an agency to support a music business. And so I was running house and techno parties in Singapore, and saw enough of an opportunity to sack off the day job. I'd been traveling around the world opening up flagship stores for Abercrombie and Fitch for the previous 6.5 years. I saw an opportunity to go out on my own and run events and simultaneously market them. And the goal was to also plug into other promotion organizations and help them with their marketing. But then there was an F&B group, and then I did some work with W Hotel, and then Sofitel, and before I knew it, it was like a logistics SaaS business that was listed on the Aussie Stock Exchange, and really kind of the marketing side of things snowballed. But that was really a couple of things happened at the same time. I was getting some of what I thought were great ideas blocked by one of my clients, mainly because I wasn't in the room where the strategy was being put together. And on the other side, I saw this logistics software company having exactly the same struggles as a load of the other clients I've been working with. And I realized that there was this kind of common theme when it came to asking the right questions about the market, asking the right questions about your customers, and really being very clear about where this leads you at a strategic level for your business. And so that's, it was that insight that led to this shift from being kind of a bit of a scrappy social media comms type of organization to one that is heavily focused on diagnosis and strategy, and really equipping leadership teams through our work with the confidence to take decisive action, even if they are not themselves veteran marketers. Right.
Interesting. Okay. So who, I guess you can help many people or many different companies, but do you have a specific, let's say, core audience when it comes to helping people and helping companies?
There's kind of two answers to this. I moved the business here from Singapore a couple of years ago. In Singapore, I had the benefit of having a very high profile through my music business. And so I had the pleasure of, even at the very early stages, working with brands like W Hotels, Samsung, Absolute Vodka. Here, my clients are predominantly small to medium sized enterprises, primarily tech companies. Apologies, sorry. I know there was another part to that question.
That's it. So
that's the long and the short of it at the moment. Typically, businesses that do not have marketing leadership in house, or they have a junior marketing leader who, as I mentioned at the top of this, has comms proficiencies, but less so diagnosis and strategy proficiencies.
Right. Okay, interesting. Would you say there are many marketing agencies out there that, overpromise but underdeliver because they focus too much on the comms, as you've said, and too little on market research and analytics and so on?
Well, I mean, it's hard to really make that judgment because in an ideal world, a business will create their strategy in-house and go to an agency that fits what they want to achieve with a very clear brief. So the agency itself is not, having to do that strategic, chin stroking in order to get lined up. This should really come from the brand itself in most instances, unless, of course, you are an agency or a consulting practice that focuses on strategy. And I think that often this is thrown on agencies. And listen, if I'm a creative agency and I've got someone wanting to do business with me and they don't have a strategy, I'll put something together, and I think that's that's often the way it goes. So it's the malaise is not the responsibility of the agencies. It's more of a global talent pool level issue where as I've said, comms is the kind of obsession at the expense of the first two bits of marketing. Right.
So, did any of your customers or let's say prospects, anyone you've been talking with, compare you to a marketing agency, or it never really happened because you positioned yourself as a strategist right off the bat at the beginning?
Yeah. I'm very clear that I won't. I touch some comms bits now and again, but it's usually like I'm doing the research and strategy bit for someone, but they also need a brand book. I'll bring someone in and we can work quite quickly in parallel with that. But no, I by the time someone gets on a call with me, they're very clear about what I do.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay, so let's say I want to be one of your customers, if I'm qualified, and we start working together. Could you share with me some of the steps that we would engage in to solve for my marketing?
Yeah. So what I've done is I've woven the necessary first step in an engagement into my kind of discovery sales process. So the first half-hour call, what I'm doing is I'm asking about your target customers, what you know about them, how you know this, how you've been listening to them, what if any primary research you might have done, what data you're sat on, have you internally segmented your customers. Beyond this, how are you positioning to them? What are those things that you want them to know about your business? And then if there's a clear answer to that, how consistently do you think that's been presented across all of your customer touch points? Whether this is email, a couple of social media accounts, and then sales decks and direct prospecting. Like, do you think every customer is seeing a similar kind of message? What are your current marketing objectives? And then obviously I need to which I typically do ahead of time, but I need to understand the product or service. I want to understand what the leadership team looks like, and with names, so I can go and scope them out. What the full marketing and sales capabilities, everything in-house, outsourced, freelancers, what that whole thing looks like. Financial year end. Marketing budget, sometimes I could be a bit sensitive. But so really with this, I'm doing two things. I'm getting to the bottom of whether they are clear on their strategy, and what they've done in order to come to that strategy, so what they've done as far as brand tracking and diagnosis. But as much as anything, I'm trying to get a read on the general kind of marketing literacy of the organization I'm working with. You can tell when you ask someone a question whether it's the first time they've had that question put to them in that way, or whether it's something. Some people are just, they're right there. They know who their customer is. They know exactly the two things they position on. So that's typically a half-hour call, and I'm usually able to understand where people sit on the spectrum of very marketing literate to not. And then from there, I'll then go away and put a research plan together. So the research plan is the kind of key strategic questions that kind of need to be answered. This could be something as simple as what proportion of your customers are corporate customers versus private individuals. How often do people purchase? Is there a big difference between these two groups? What's the average purchase price between these two groups? Right? Right. Kind of fundamental understanding of where the money comes from.
Yeah.
Critically. This comes along with the critical activities that I would see being best deployed in order to capture that information. And then a timeline for what a project would look like with me involved in it or not. I mean, it's the kind of thing that if you had a savvy marketing team, they could go and take this and run with it. And that's fine. It's an end in and of itself for me. I extract a huge amount of value just from conducting these early calls. But yeah, that would be it. It'd be me trying to get a real sense of where your business is at as far as your marketing capabilities and literacy at a leadership level, and then delivering a plan for a minimum effective dose of diagnosis. It's very easy once you know your way around the various fun, at least for me, because I'm basically a big nerd, market research tools and processes to really go off the deep end. But I'm always thinking, often this is people doing their first bit of proper diagnosis. What is the absolute leanest and most athletic way that we can get to the point where they can feel confident, putting a strategy in place for a year, and really committing to that and aligning everything that they do tactically behind that.
Right. Okay. So if putting yourself in the shoes of someone else was a skill, you can let's call it empathy, for example. This skill, is it a requirement for anyone striving to become an exceptional marketer?
Empathy?
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite that's a bit of a landmine, because empathy, yes, because I think there are instances where it's important that you project, but empathy at the expense of actually going and listening, actually going and talking to people, is where companies go wrong. They expect to be able to intuit, in a hermetically sealed office, they expect to be able to intuit what the market wants, and they feel because they're empathetic and they understand their brand and they're sensitive marketers, that they can work that out. But this can really lead you down a lot of assumptions. Yeah, it leads you down the wrong path for sure. I think empathy is important because empathy is kind of that little bit of human imagination around how certain circumstances might make people feel, but it should never be deployed at the expense of actually connecting with your customers. I mean, I think empathy from a marketing standpoint isn't the right word for it. Being market oriented is really what companies should be keeping at the forefront of their minds when they think about their marketing and really the broader organization.
Right. Okay. Would you have a success story to share with us?
Yeah, I did a project earlier this year with a kind of veteran finance guy who was in the process of setting up a treasury banking optimization consulting practice. And the reason I'm calling this one out is just that it was an instance where someone who had zero marketing background, sales background, which helped, but zero marketing background, finished out this project with a very clear idea of what he needed to do as far as outward communications. The project finished with for a full day's session. I brought in a couple of, which is something I like to do at the end of a project, bring in a couple of kind of comms experts and put together, okay, this is your starting tomorrow, starting once you hit this revenue milestone, and then you think about this set of activities once you hit this next revenue milestone, right? Really build that out. So they only need to look at 2 things next week, and it's, LinkedIn content. Here's some graphics that you can use in order to kind of support that. But just watching someone go from incredibly uncertain about all of the million things that anyone might do with their marketing, to walking out of that room confident that, okay, I have these activities, I'm going to do this much of it,
right?
Do it, this many times a week, in order to, put that baseline of kind of marketing output there. And we did equip him with enough clarity to make decisions as well, right? So we boiled the market down, and there were 2 clear segments that made the most sense for him to go after. He could go very broad. There were 2 that seemed very low friction for a number of reasons, some of which I probably shouldn't share. But so, from this vantage point, we were able to say, listen, you can either double down on these segments and attune all of your messaging to this, or you can keep it more broad if you think that there's a good chance that you will drive business from other segments, and so as not to put them off.
Yeah. And
from the vantage point of having really done the research, he was able to make that decision confidently without being a marketer. And he's since signed deals and brought me into one of them, which I think is always a good sign.
Nice. Yeah, beautiful. Okay. How would you envision the next 5 to 10 years in marketing? So you can answer as you please. Of course, when I ask this question, many people talk about AI, how it's changing the game. Also, meta ads. This is more in the comms side, but still, which is evolving pretty fast at the moment. Yeah.
Well, I think that obviously this is we're gonna get to the how impactful these learns like this guy. And but you're right. It's quite common spoke. Although there are some interesting research diagnosis tools coming out. One which is it's essentially synthetic data. So I'm not sure about the process exactly, but I believe just like a large language model, it's great for indications about market sentiment, and putting together what it believes would be the market response about levels of awareness, about sentiment around a new kind of positioning or marketing campaign. So I think there's definitely a lot of excitement to come from AI. I think importantly, though, or shit in, shit out paradigm is essential to keep front of mind, because you can have the best tools in the world. If you don't know the fundamental structures of the discipline, you're probably going to get the best out of those tools, right? I have Photoshop, I have Illustrator as part of my subscription, my Adobe subscription. I suck at graphic design. I'm not going to pretend to be a genius. I have a world-class tool in my hands, but I'm not producing world-class design. And so, there's a lot of froth about AI in the same way that a bunch of people made a load of money quick, selling garbage with, Bitcoin.com. You go down the line, right? I think we'll see that, and it's very frothy and hyped at the moment. But it'll calm down, and the actually beneficial AI products will stand the test of time.
Yeah, amazing. So anyone listening that's interested in you and your company and working with you, how can they reach out to you, and how can you actually help them? Let's say in a few sentences.
Yeah. So importantly, I offer the market research custom insights plan for free. It's a half-an-hour call with me, where, as I described before, it's about absorbing the essential
info from you. And then within a week or so, you'll have a plan, set key strategic questions, the processes by which you can capture this, what the timeline would look like, and often some kind of low-hanging fruit where your particular situation has parallels with projects successfully deployed in the past. And then if it seems like a good idea to bring me in to execute on that plan, then we can talk money. You can find me on LinkedIn at Oliver JP Osborne, or you can go to OHCool, that's ohcool.ca, and connect with me through that.
So you can book a call directly on your website, right?
That's
beautiful.
Right.
Beautiful. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Killian. Pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, take care.